Welcome to the Mix Minus podcast. As Tim finishes his drink right in your microphone.
Sorry about that.
It's all right.
It's good.
You gotta get proteined up for this. So Tim Castano is back. We're gonna talk about the NFC wildcard weekend especially because the New York Giants are back in the playoffs after 4 years out, right?
Technically 5.
Technically 5.
Yeah, because it was 2011 season.
Right. Going into, oh wow, that's unbelievable. Mm-hmm. That's a long, long drought.
It is.
It's amazing how that can happen, and it doesn't even feel, that's a lot of years. That's a presidential term.
It is. There was a child born then who is now like in kindergarten or something.
My child was born in the middle of it, and he's now past 2. That's crazy.
I know.
Now, with the New York Mets, who are a team I really root for, they obviously went to the World Series last year, not this year, that just passed. And it looked like they weren't going to get to the playoffs this year. They lost a lot of their key parts, pitchers, position players, and they were able to fight to get themselves to the one-game wild card play-in type of deal. And I remember on that day I did sort of a quick podcast, and I said, I think the Mets have done enough. They got there. Win or lose, they had to hit against Bumgarner, which they didn't get any hits, but they hung in there in that game. But I said to myself, they've done enough. Keeping the chain going of having made the playoffs. Now, if they make it next year and have a run, at least they didn't break that chain. Now, the Giants, having not been in the playoffs for this amount of time, they had a really good season, 11-5, even though it felt precarious at times, as all NFL seasons do. We were talking about how Mike McCarthy felt like he was on the hot seat. And there's nothing a 6-game winning streak can't fix. Now, do you think the Giants have done enough going into this game before winning?
Yes.
Yeah.
I do. I definitely do.
Why is that?
I think they were on the, well, not really. I mean, it's funny. I think the fans have an unusual view of the Giants where we think that they are going to win the Super Bowl regardless, just because of how they've won the last 2 Super Bowls and the runs that they went on, that we've been conditioned in a way to believe that even a team that performs in a mediocre fashion, that if things break the right way, they can go all the way to the Super Bowl. And that I think that mentality is healthy and happy, so that when the Giants fans look at this season and see that they are in some ways tapping into that, they're keeping that hope alive, that mentality alive, and they've done it. I think that's enough. So that has been missing. I mean, 2014 it was there a little bit because they got, I think, eliminated later in the season, and even 2013 when they started on a terrible losing streak, but then started to win a few. You weren't talking to when you talk to Giants fans, they said it wasn't like, oh, okay, maybe we can put together 8-8, maybe we can, just have a decent season. It was, no, we're going to go on a run and then we're going to go to the Super Bowl. So I look at it as being successful in that regard, that from a fan's point of view, we're here talking today. When you're listening to fans on the radio, speaking to them just in casual conversation, we're going to the Super Bowl. And I think that alone makes it a success, that we're having that conversation in January. And
it was a better regular season than they had in those years.
It was.
That they went to the Super Bowl.
They were, was it 8-8, 9-7? Or no,
it was 10-6
and 9-7. Yeah.
The 9-7 is crazy. They went to win it.
The thing about that is that 10-6 was not. They were a wild card, and 9-7 they won the division. Yeah, you would think it'd be the other way around.
And now they're 11-5, and they're 5th seed.
Yeah, and by the way, we both predicted 11-5 for the Giants before the season.
And in our picks, I think I was 15, 12-6 or something crazy like that, and then you were maybe 12.
I was terrible.
12, 16, and yeah, we had the same amount of push. Well, you would always have the same amount of pushes because. Mm-hmm. You could be on the over or under side of the bet. But yes, we did have them there. And I think the hope was they would get to 10. But when you looked at the key is looking at the schedule and truly saying to yourself, with what you're kind of proposing the rest of the league is going to do or be, the Giants really should get themselves to a good position where they could get to 10 wins. And they actually blipped out where we didn't think they would. I think we thought they would split the Green Bay, Minnesota games.
I didn't think they would lose to the Redskins at home.
Yeah, losing to the Redskins was crazy. But they've gone on a run. They've been good. I think the tough part with this team is that they've sort of turned into a defensive stalwart with an offense that is subpar, though extremely exciting and electric when the ball gets in the right hands. They were 26th in points per game this year. They were 29th in rush yards per game. Of course, they did allow the second fewest points per game this season, which I think was about like 18, which is that's a great place to be. It's sort of, the defense is sort of like pitching, right? I mean, it sort of carries itself in a season, wins regular season games, and then carries that right over into the playoffs and wins, especially just like with pitching in baseball, cold weather. And then sort of the offense has become that pretty good lineup that has the players who can potentially hit a big home run and win a one-run game. So I think they're really well set up for that. I actually think they line up very well against the Packers. And I think the fact that they lost earlier in the year, because I believe in a lot of compensatory action, especially in sports. There's always sort of a reaction to something that happened. Now, on the flip side, if the Giants ever got past this game and they would play the Cowboys at that point, the fact they've beat the Cowboys twice, I know some people could say, oh, that's dominance. That means you're really feeling good. But it also could be the flip side. You never know. Although those were very toss-up games, so I don't think anybody takes too much away on either side. Either team could have easily won those games. But with the Packers, they really should line up very well. The Packers can give up a lot of points. I mean, they had that game where Chicago came all the way back in the cold. And I think they scored 30, Chicago, in that game. Chicago. Now, they have some weapons, as all NFL teams do. But the Giants truly have some weapons. And they have the potential kryptonite, though I don't want to say that fully about Aaron Rodgers, because he's played very well. And I could see him breaking around tackles and waiting for people to get open. But their secondary is so good, 3 deep, good all over the place. And I know Aaron Rodgers said, as long as I can see my receiver and I see the back of the cornerback, that's enough space for me. But we've always been talking about their receivers. Now, they did get Jordy Nelson back this year, and he's been as good as ever. But their receivers have never lit the world on fire. So all things line up to me that the Giants should be very competitive against this specific team and this group of players. And as I said, Green Bay can let up a lot of points. Maybe it's time for the Giants to find a way to, if this has all been a mad science plan, to keep things really conservative and down. Maybe Ben McAdoo, of all people, would know if Eli Manning truly has lost some of the fastball. And so I'm kind of playing with those things, but we've seen Eli make some really great passes still. The last game, was it King? Is that the guy's name? It's always the no-name guys coming up in the playoffs too. That helped get that big catch. But things really feel like they line up really well. Giants were very bad again in running, but the last game they looked a lot better at that. Even with an 11-5, they might be surging a little bit in the right places to play this Packers team.
I think the win over Washington was important because they did not want to conclude the season with 2 losses. As you pointed out, it's interesting that the Packers' strengths on offense line up with the Giants' strengths on defense. So really powerful secondary, good receivers. I'm interested to see if the fact that the Packers have a fair running game. It's not great. It's certainly not. It's not what their receiving core is. They
have a little electricness, though. Electricity, not electric.
They do.
With Montgomery moving him in the backfield.
Giants have been much better against the run, obviously, this season, with Harrison specifically. So I'm interested to see that if the relative weakness of their running game allows then the Giants to develop more of a pass rush than they otherwise would have if they were playing a Dallas or someone like that. So that's something I'm going to be looking at on the defensive side. So I'd take the Giants secondary over any secondary in the league. right now. Maybe even Denver possibly is better, but I would take the Giants over Denver, especially with the injuries that Seattle's had. And you've heard people say it. I heard Mike Francesa say it, which is this is the best Giants secondary he's ever seen. Even the 86 team, their strength was up front. Even the Super Bowl teams, decent secondaries, but their strength was up front. But this is the best he's ever seen. So I definitely think the Giants will be competitive. I do. Now, I should say that anytime I make a sports prediction, the complete opposite happens. I learned this in 1994 when the Giants played the 49ers in San Francisco, and I was certain that the Giants were going to win and win by more than 2 touchdowns. And 5 Ricky Waters touchdowns later, we saw what happened. So my predictions almost always are wrong.
Well, one game, just like the NCAA tournament. I mean, you just can't.
You can't. So, and it's funny, we were talking about this before we started, which is the Giants and Packers played in the preseason, but it almost has no bearing whatsoever on how we're looking at this playoff game because they seem like 2 entirely different teams.
How about from when they played early in the season?
That's what I'm saying.
You said pre.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. Apologies.
That's right.
That they, the Packers were not the same team. They did not have it all together the way they do right now. And the Giants' defense was still gelling, was not quite playing at the level it is right now, weren't getting to the quarterback the same way. So I look at that contest and it doesn't tell me a lot about what I'm going to expect to see on Sunday.
No, they're both surging. Does the fact that they've won 6 straight, does that make you feel good about regression to the mean? Or does that feels like too long of a search?
It does, and against whom? I mean, they did what they had to do to get in the playoffs. Well, you could also say, though, that the Giants, especially in 2011, had to go on a similar run to get into the playoffs, although they got tripped up along the way. The Packers are hot. They're playing very well. The other thing is that this 6-game streak almost has triggered a different historical consideration of Aaron Rodgers, where obviously 2 MVPs, 1 Super Bowl. He's had a terrific career, but it seems like, especially over recent weeks, people are starting to speak of him in more historical terms and more like hagiography, that they're putting him in the pantheon now. That, well, the way he plays and his mechanics certainly, I think, do put him in that category. What he can do on the field is up there with a lot of the all-time greats. But it just, that's something that I've noticed, that people are speaking of Aaron Rodgers differently over the last 6 weeks than they have throughout his career. And we're talking about someone who earlier in the season was absorbing a great deal of criticism for his play, that he wasn't focused, that he wasn't the same player, had he lost it, and he certainly has turned it on. So the Packers, I know we looked at the percentages of each team's chance to win the Super Bowl, and the Packers have a marginally higher percentage than the Giants.
Yeah, Bill Barnwell, I don't know if it's his own projections, but in ESPN he had a pretty good feature on previews, and he had 4%, I think, for them, 0.8 for the Giants, which I was saying it sort of seems unfair, but it makes a lot of sense when you play the numbers, that the Giants, who have to play on the road the whole time pretty much, go through some really tough places. It's amazing they're 11-5 and that they're pushed back to this level right now. But I think that it's going to be somewhere between, right now it's looking 6 and 15 degrees, maybe 15 around game time, and it could go down to 6. It's going to be real cold. It's interesting that the players, the wide receivers, should go from the picture of them with their shirts off in Miami, and then by the end of that week, they're going to be in like 6-degree weather. We'll have to see how that plays out. But yeah, I think it's a very, it's definitely the most interesting game of the weekend. It's the most, it's the kind of game you feel like you would see for a championship, conference championship type game.
I think if the sense I'm getting is that a lot of people believe whoever wins this game is going to be the NFC's representative in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And it could just be that we live in New York, so we're hearing that. It could just be that it is the most interesting and compelling of all the games this weekend, but that just seems to me the sense that people have about this, about either of these teams, that nobody wants to play Green Bay, and probably less afraid of the Giants, but still, I don't think they want to play them.
Well, Eli just turned 36, like 2 days ago. And Aaron Rodgers, I believe, just turned
32.
Or is it 33?
33.
Yeah, I think it was 33. So winning just takes care of things. It just always does. People were doubting Rodgers when the team was 4-6, and then he said, we're going to run the table. And somehow they did. Same thing a couple of years ago with Tom Brady. They were saying after that terrible loss in Kansas City, I think, ooh, are we sure? Maybe the next guy up. Sort of the David Ortiz thing that was always happening. Great players, I just don't think lose it at the quarterback position the way they might at others, especially if they're somewhat protected, because Peyton Manning made a lot of sense. He had an actual injury that affected the nerve endings in your hand and affected your flexibility and maneuverability, and he looked very stiff last year. That said, a great defense, you can still win. And I kind of feel as though there's this idea that Eli is almost the Peyton of last year now. And I don't know if I see that enough. I know we've had this discussion, but I was even looking back. When you have a long enough career in one place, sort of the good things that have happened in that place just overwhelm maybe some of the negative things. People think of the 2 Super Bowls, which anybody would take for any career, no matter how bad a season could be or statistics. But like, for instance, he's never even been as good in a season the way he was in the two runs. You know, if you take away, I was just looking at this the other day, if you take away the seasons where they didn't make runs, right? So when they went to the playoffs and they were out, the Giants are pretty much always out in one game or they go to the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. He was 6 TDs and 1 interception in 2007 and 9 TDs and 1 interception in 2011. So you're looking at a 15-2 touchdown to interception ratio. That is like the run Aaron Rodgers is on. He has 0. It's the kind of run that Tom Brady makes. You'd rather the guy make it here. And I was trying to think of, like, what is Manning? Is he because I have to almost think of it in baseball terms. I was thinking, what do you think of Brad Lidge? Because you got a guy who had moments in the playoffs, won World Series, could be dominant, but then sort of could have some issues with delivery that would throw you right off, and then he could be hit around the park. Doesn't he kind of feel like Brad Lidge? I mean, he's not Mariano, obviously, he's not a closer, but he's better than I was trying to think of, like, closers who have a lot of postseason success. He's not Koji Uehara, who had like an unbelievable run with the Red Sox. It's very difficult to see, but he's almost got that where you can show dominance at a championship level and move through on a 15-2 rate separated by 4 years. Because I was also looking at his season, and I totally don't even remember this. This is the best part of football, is you just forget the past, kind of, especially except when there's an amazing win, right? But what the heck happened was it 2013. What happened? 18 touchdowns and 27 interceptions? Mm-hmm. Why don't I remember this? Do you even remember what happened that season? I
do. I think that was the last season of Kevin Gilbride as his offensive coordinator.
But, like, how does that work? I can't even recall it. Like, that's the beauty of time.
Well, that was when they lost, was it 4 in a row to start the season or 5 in a row? And they had to go, the first win was against Minnesota on a Monday night. And they ticked off a few more wins, but it was an ugly season from the start. And as I said, they then, Kevin Gilbride retired and they brought in Ben McAdoo. And even when McAdoo was first there, I think he struggled a little bit, but then finally got into his groove.
Well, so actually, like, here's the crazy part. So his touchdowns were down this year because of, I'm hoping it's just this kind of conservative plan to keep the game close, understand your defense is going to grow into itself, and we're going to win this way because this is how things will happen in the playoffs. Nobody's going to blow each other out. So if you're really well prepared for close games, they're not going to shock you when you get to the playoffs. That's also what I like about being on the road, because I think, like, the tenseness and that stuff gets to the home team more, because the crowd, you can feel them just, you could feel everything evaporate from their body, like especially when Eli's hitting a long throw, and it's that sad moment where it's like 8:00 at night and it's 4 degrees in Green Bay. But he had 26 touchdowns to 16 interceptions this year. 16 interceptions is kind of his normal rate. It's just that the touchdowns were down 9 from last year. He had 35 touchdowns last year. So I don't think he's done. He threw for 4,400 yards. But if you look at his season this year, it's not that terribly off. 377 completions, 63% completion rate. Just over 4,000 yards he got there. He did play all the games, obviously. 26 TDs, 16 interceptions. His QBR is pretty bad at 55.4, and then whatever his rating is 86. But last year he had 4,400 yards. He basically had one more good game than this year. 4,400 yards, 63% completion rate, but it was rounding up as opposed to this year, which is just straight up 63. And again, the 35 touchdowns, but the year before that he had 30 touchdowns and 14 interceptions. So I don't know that Eli's been that different than he has been in previous years. It's just they haven't scored more passing touchdowns.
But having observed him, I think we've made this point before in some of these discussions, is that he doesn't seem to be as sharp with the long ball. Although last week that he improved a little bit, and that seems to where he's missing. So that he was relying too much on short passes and didn't seem to have the same touch that he did in previous seasons with some of the longer balls. And I speculated, is that why he targets Beckham so much? Because Beckham's athleticism maybe can compensate for his lack of accuracy.
And less time.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know. That's what I'm interested to see is does the touch come back? Because I've noticed that maybe missing a little bit in his game. And who knows? Is it the receivers or is it he? You just don't know. But otherwise, yeah, he has put in a fairly standard Eli Manning season. And we should note that he, I think, is up to 7th all time in terms of touchdown or is it yards or touchdowns? I think it's touchdowns.
Yeah, I think it was
all time. So when his career is over, he's probably going to be in the top 5 in almost every category, which is, again, he's not someone you think of as putting up big numbers during the regular season, but when all is said and done, he has. So that's something I'm going to look at again on Sunday is does he have the precision and the accuracy for the mid-range to long-range balls, the home run ball, because that, as we know from the last time they played Green Bay in the playoffs, that really can take a team out of the entire game. So the Hakeem Nicks,
does he not have enough protection though?
They're getting better. I mean, they definitely over the last few weeks, I think they've gotten better. Flowers got called last week for a holding call, but he seems to have improved a little bit. And Pugh's back, and that helps on that side of the line. But maybe. I mean, people are always going to question the offensive line. I don't think it's as bad as maybe some believe it to be. So I think they have a game in them or several games in them where they can give him the protection he needs.
Well, don't you think the fact that McAdoo is an offensive guy, that most offensive dominant kind of coaches are not going to want to play this conservatively unless there's a reason to? I mean, it's been the whole season, and he was able to get them 11 wins.
Yeah, I don't know how much I would say that they're playing possum.
No, but I'm saying that this just might be what they are because he knows deep down the limitations and parameters he's playing within. I mean, I would think most offensive coaches want to get 30 a game, yes. Right? So the fact that they're getting 10 points in a game, I mean, really this week was 13. I mean, the offense is getting like 13, 15 points, 16 points. I can't imagine he's like dying to do that, especially when he was at the helm of a team that had 35 passing touchdowns last year. So I think potentially you have to give him the credit for knowing his team because it comes out in the wash with 11 wins.
Yeah, I would think so. He knows that quarterback. He's been with them now for 3 seasons. So he's calling the game that he thinks that he can play. I do think, for instance, Perkins, I think they've been bringing him along slowly and are saving him maybe a little bit for a game like this. We saw it last week that he got more carries. And I think that that's a smart thing the Giants did in 2007, 2008 with their run there, which is their rookies whom they had drafted really contributed toward the end, that they brought them along slowly. And then by the time they got to the playoffs, they were getting a lot out of them. So when I look at Perkins at the game he did last week, I think that hopefully can happen this week as well.
Interesting thing from that NFL preview, they had a lot of like little charts and stuff. And there was one for fewest cap dollars spent on offensive lines in 2016. The NFL average is $22.7 million. So the Seahawks are at $6.2 million. The Giants are next up at $13.2 million. So that can either be because you have young players, or you're not looking to shell out, or you shelled out everything towards the defense, because I think 63% of their monies this offseason went to the defense. And it's just the confines you have to play in with a team. You just hope it doesn't, and it didn't, get Eli hurt, because he's getting a little up there, even though you just don't see him as a 36-year-old man. But yeah, I think you want to get the one win to feel good about keeping on moving. I mean, it really does, even though I started by saying, have they done enough? Yes, they've done enough. They gave you 3-4 months now of exciting football, feeling good about moving to the next week. It hasn't been like the last few years where you're sort of out of it and the games don't matter and you're watching almost as an outsider. You're completely involved. Another weird stat I saw was they're 7th or better in this DVOA statistic for all of their defensive back positions as in terms of playing against receivers. They're 26th though against tight ends. Now I don't think with Green Bay that's necessarily going to hurt you, even though it feels like Jordy Nelson is the size of a tight end. So yeah, I could see this being one of those. I just have a strange feeling the Giants can really win this one.
6 games, Aaron Rodgers has not thrown an interception. Giants secondary feasts on interceptions.
Yeah, so big time. And DRC is coming on pretty strong.
If they can get one early in the game, I think that will be telling as to what happens.
And if they can take it back for some level. And obviously the special teams will be very, very important. What are we thinking about? We'll just kind of quickly go through some of the other games. Saturday is not a very fun. Of course, for you have a party. You wish that your party could be on Saturday. But you got Oakland versus Houston in the backup quarterback bowl.
Oof. I feel so sorry for the poor Raiders fans.
Yeah, that's a really
to have an MVP candidate as your quarterback, put together a great season. I still say I think Jack Del Rio's coach of the year. And then to have that injury occur, it's and to fall.
Think they could win. You still think they could win this one?
Yeah, they do. I
defense,
think they
even Mac. I could imagine Mac doing some carnage in the backfield.
They definitely could win this
fumble, taking one back.
And there's something about Houston where the rumblings about Bill O'Brien not being happy, wanting out. You just don't know what you're going to get out of him. Osweiler's starting after having been benched. It's I don't know. It just doesn't seem. Not a lot of positive indicators around Houston right now.
Yeah, it's weird how he's brought back. He's sort of like what happened with Ryan Fitzpatrick and the Jets. They're like, we're done with Ryan Fitzpatrick. And then quarterbacks are going down, and then he's starting on the final game of the season that doesn't matter. Yeah, there's almost nothing that is that exciting about that game either, because you understand it's sort of like an NIT. The winner is going to feel really good about winning a round, but then they're just going to go into the conveyor belt of New England, and none of those quarterbacks are going to look that good. It might be like the game Connor Cook was in last year when he was with Michigan State, and they lost like 38-0 to Alabama. Yeah, I guess Osweiler can sort of rehabilitate his image if he takes them on some kind of run, but he looks completely shell-shocked. He looks awkward as a quarterback. I thought he would come on much better. I still think they covered my bet with the wins for the season somehow at 9-7, but I thought they would win 10. So football is crazy. The difference between thinking of 10 wins and how different actually getting 9 feels, because you've lost 7 games. Like, it's a lot of losses. Then we have the Lions at the Seahawks. The Seahawks are an 8-point favorite. I have a weird feeling because of the way things are kind of set up, and how kind of under the radar, pretty good Stafford's been, even with his finger thing he's got going on, and the fact that Seattle sort of lost their defensive soul a little bit in Earl Thomas. You almost can see the like Golden Tate going back to Seattle. You can almost see some broken long plays potentially happening with the bad with the not great offensive line. There's just something that the Seahawks won 10 games through infrastructure. They won it through just like an army moving forward. But they're just missing some key elements that almost could make them vulnerable right away.
Except they're playing a team that's lost the last 3 games. They've closed the season out rather weakly. So
they didn't look good against the Giants.
They didn't look good against the Giants. Looked better against the Packers, but still did not look good. I would like to see the Lions win, if only because that keeps alive the chance that the Giants could host the NFC Championship game.
That would be fun.
That's the only way it could happen. But I'm somewhat with you where I wouldn't be astonished if Detroit went in there and won, but
or kept it. They've played close. You know, when they were playing well, everything was close. It was down on the wire.
But I do think it's going to be Seattle.
Yeah, I think so too. And then the last one, because we talked about Giants Packers, Dolphins Steelers. Again, one of these deals where
Tannehill's not playing.
He is playing now,
no,
or he's not playing
he's
now?
Not playing.
Okay, yeah, that's a little alarming. But the Steelers are another one of these teams, 11-win team, who you never felt amazed. They had to win 7 games, I think, to finish the season out to get where they were going. So what does that mean math-wise? That means they were 4-5, right? So they're a 10-point favorite. There's just something about them, though, that Le'Veon Bell needs to be clicking. There needs to be some big plays from Ben to Brown and to Eli. Shoot, what's that guy's? Eli. I can't think of his name off the top of my head. But yeah, I think that they're obviously gonna win, I would think. Although the Dolphins have something about them where the running back Ajayi has been really, really good. They have a defense that can play pretty well, and defense does travel. And they've been feisty. I thought the Dolphins were going to be a normal Dolphins team that just under-impresses, and I think we had them at a real low win total. We had them, I believe, on whatever the under was. But they've been feisty. To get yourself to 10 wins means you have a well-coached group, and they started out 0-2, I think. It might have been even 0-3. So there's some feistiness where they could give, and the Steelers aren't that same old Steelers defense. They have some opportunistic players. They have, but they don't have that same rush, I feel like. So I don't know. I think it could be more of a game than a 10-point favorite.
I guess it'd definitely be more of a game. Steelers were my preseason Super Bowl pick for the AFC, so I'm going to stick with them. But I get I know what you're saying. They didn't. Every week they went into each game and it was a toss-up almost. No matter who they played, you could just see it going either way, which you didn't expect for this team heading into the season. But I'm still going to go with the Steelers. I think it's great for Miami fans and Pittsburgh fans to have a Miami-Pittsburgh playoff game. I mean, that's it takes you back to 1970s, which is kind of fun. But I think other than the Giants, I think the home teams are going to pull it out this weekend.
Other than the Giants, and then
no, actually, I'm sorry. Raiders are at Houston, so I think the Raiders will win too.
I was trying to. We should just finish our thing here on our little thoughts on the picks. So, because I was breaking out here, so I have it open here. I went, I think 15, 13, and 4, and you went 12, 16, and 4. Where we were really wrong, and as was the rest of America here, was Carolina. You know what? Actually, I think, did I give you Carolina? Because you won. You won Carolina, actually, because you said they were going to go 10-6, but it was a 10.5. Yeah, so your record's better, actually, because Carolina. I mean, you still thought they'd get 10 wins, but the win over under was 10.5. I had them at 11. You had them at 10. So that is one where we can flip that record around. The Bengals were a big letdown.
Arizona
Arizona was a huge letdown. Arizona was a 9.5 point, and they went 7-8-1. Cleveland was a weird one. I won, you didn't win because you went with 5 wins. I went with 4 on a 4.5. We were obviously, like many people, wrong on Dallas.
Jacksonville, I was wrong.
Jacksonville, very wrong. Denver ended up being on the number. You were a little more behind them than I was. We were obviously wrong on Detroit, even though they kind of regressed back over the season. We were wrong on Green Bay, only by how dominant they would be.
I was wrong on Kansas City. But, that's one of those things you can't see Tyreek Hill coming. And that is the one piece that sort of took them over. And for Kansas City to win 12 games and to lose 2 of their games at home to Mariota and to Winston, that's pretty unbelievable. If you had said that at the start of the season, you would have thought your bet was right. Minnesota, what a joke. Tennessee, I was wrong.
How crazy is it that the win over-under was 8 for Minnesota, and that's exactly what they did. So sometimes, and what does this mean for Sam Bradford?
It'll be interesting to see. Yeah, it depends upon how Teddy Bridgewater, how well he heals.
I mean, but what is he? Like Sam Bradford, you would think, like, what happened to this team? Maybe he's just an awful leader. I mean, what the heck happened with that team? Yeah, we were wrong with Miami. We were right on New England. We were right on with New Orleans. We called that. You could call New Orleans with this as assembled squad. They're 7-9 written all over as long as Drew Brees plays. It's not even his fault. It's just a barnstorming tour now. Jets, everyone, that thing fell apart quick. We were good on Oakland. Philly ended up at their number, which was surprising early, and then they really fell off late. I don't know what they do for their team moving forward, but I guess they got 7 wins with a rookie quarterback. That's pretty good. Whew. San Diego was, oh man, that was not a fun season. Coach lost his job. San Francisco was a 5.5. I had them at 4 wins. You had them at 5, so we were both correct on that one. Seattle underwhelmed, as we said. Tampa Bay, you were on that because you had them 9-7. They did win 8, but they were a toss-up to get to that. Or no, they were 9-7. You had them 8-8, but the over/under was 7.5, so you did win that. I had them at 5, so they definitely did well there. Very wrong on Tennessee.
Yeah, I say Tennessee had the season I thought Jacksonville was going to have.
Yes, you were right about that. Yeah, but it's crazy when you do these bets. Like, we really put a lot of time into this, and you were better off because you would be 13. You would now be, I guess, 13, 15, and 4. Yeah, so it's just the little nick of I'm 15, 13, you're 13, 15. And we put a lot into it, and teams just missed there. So I'll have to update that for you. But yeah, it was a good season. Let's hope we continue it.
Yeah, it would be nice to. So we'll see.